Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome back to the show. My name is Deanna Yates, and you are listening to episode 264 of the Wannabe Clutter-Free podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by the incredibly insightful and refreshingly honest Paige Connell. You may know her as she is a Paige Turner on Instagram and TikTok, where she shares candid, relatable content about what it's really like to juggle motherhood, careers, relationships, and of course, the mental load that comes with it all. She is a working mom of 4, a fierce advocate for affordable childcare and paid leave, and an amazing voice for equity at home and in the workplace. This conversation is about more than just the invisible labor that we carry, although we definitely go there. We also talk about how to start shifting that load, what it takes to advocate for yourself and your family, and why it's okay and necessary to stop doing it all. If you've ever felt the weight of being the default parent, the emotional thermostat for your home, or just the one holding all the tabs open in your brain, well, this episode is for you. Plus, there's no man bashing here, okay? It is a honest conversation about what we can do to lift all parties and make sure we're all coming together. But before we jump in, I want to say thank you to you for being here today. If you enjoy this episode, please go ahead and hit that follow or subscribe button so that you don't miss what's coming next. We have some amazing conversations coming up for you, so make sure you're following along. And share the show with a friend or tag me on Instagram. I am at Wannabe Clutter Free. I love hearing from you. All right, as always, show notes and links from today's episode are waiting for you over at wannabeclutterfree.com/264. Again, that's wannabeclutterfree.com/264. All right, let's get to it. Well, hey, Paige, welcome to Wannabe Clutter Free. How you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
I am so excited to have you here. I think we're going to get into some really interesting topics and conversation pieces, and it's going to be really helpful to the women that listen to this show. But before we jump into that, can you tell us who you are, what you do?
Sure. Yes, I am a mom of 4 kids. I am a content creator and specifically kind of a leading thought leader in the space of the mental load of motherhood, the childcare crisis, and how it intersects with the gender equity conversation as it pertains to kind of marriage and the workplace and parenting.
It's such a big topic and so necessary. And I'm so happy that we are having these conversations in the world today because I know my mom didn't get to have these conversations, right? I just love that we are at least able to, whether we are making the strides as quickly as we would like or not, at least it is a conversation we're having. I was saying before we started this, I am just in awe of women who have more than one child and can keep it all running and keep it all together and all those different personalities. I am so in awe of you. So you're a working mom of 4, right? How do you actually do it all? I have no idea. Or maybe the better question is, what do you let go of in order to do it all?
Yeah, I have a partner that I would consider an equal participant in parenting. I think that's a big part of this. I have had jobs that are flexible and understanding of me being a parent. That's also been really important. I don't know that any corporate job is fully flexible, but more so than others for sure. And then I would also say childcare. Childcare is a huge part of it. I think without the childcare that we have, I wouldn't be able to do any of the things that I do for my career.
Yeah, I love that you're honest and open about that. And, I know a lot of women struggle with that, right? Struggle with the idea of quote unquote, someone else raising my child, right? I mean, have we heard that conversation or those words? And let's stop putting each other down. Let's stop making it a competition amongst women, right? We don't need to do that. We're all doing the best we can, hopefully, and doing what works for us. And not every woman wants to stay home. Not every woman wants to work outside of the home. Lots of us want to do a hybrid of the two. So yeah, what do you say when you get that kind of feedback or pushback and people kind of go against that?
Yeah, it's very timely. I've actually addressed this twice this week on my pages because it's come up a few times, which is I feel like this comment comes from a place of defensiveness oftentimes, trying to defend why they've become a stay-at-home parent. Like, I've chosen to raise my own children. Sometimes, not always. So sometimes I think it's a defense mechanism because as stay-at-home moms, oftentimes their work isn't valued. And so they're placing value on the work they're doing. And so part of me understands that. I understand trying to say like, hey, this is really important work that I'm doing. And it is. Nobody's negating that. But I also think what it does is it shames women for the choices they make in a way we never do to men. We never accuse men who work full time of abandoning their children for someone else to raise. We don't even expect them to know who their kid's teacher is, let alone to stop working. And so I find that the double standards are very frustrating. And more so than that, I think the expectations we have for working mothers or just mothers in general these days are much higher than they previously were. You mentioned our parents, and I think, yeah, my mom was a working mom, but the expectations were different. And working moms today spend more time with their kids than stay at home moms did 40 years ago. We are much more involved and expected to be much more involved in our kids' lives, even the way that we're taught to like always be talking to the baby and playing with them and reading to them. And I don't think our parents were doing that. I know they weren't doing that. And so I think that has to be part of the conversation too, which is just because you have a job does not mean you're not raising them. And when people say the nanny or the daycare is raising them, that's not an inherently bad thing. It's a good thing to have multiple people within your community helping to raise your child. It is a beneficial thing, which is why you constantly hear about the village. It's just a different form of what that looks like when you're a working parent and you are paying for childcare.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Just because you're paying for it doesn't mean that you're negating that responsibility. It takes a village. And back in the day, everybody would like pitch in. Why is it so stigmatized that just because you're saying, no, that I purposely chose this person to be part of my village and I'm paying them to be part of my village? And yeah, I think we should be accepting of that. Yeah, so much there. And what you said about the defensiveness, it makes sense, right? Because if you're able to do that, like, or why am I not, or maybe I'm feeling inadequate, and people often lash out, right? Hurt people, and people lash out because they're not feeling confident in their decisions sometimes. And so, yeah, I think we could just let people choose how they want to be and what they want to do and be okay with that and not have to bash someone else for their decisions.
Yeah, and I think sometimes I encourage people to zoom out, right? Take a different lens, zoom out. If I told you I'm a full-time working mom of 4 kids, but my mom watches my kids, do you view that as negative or not? Most often people actually don't view that as a bad thing, right? They're not saying you're abandoning your child because grandma's with them and they view that as inherently a good thing, right? Family is with them. But you talk to a lot of people and they'll say, yeah, my mom could watch my kids, but my mom's not very good with toddlers. She doesn't have patience. She never cuts their grapes. And so sometimes a paid childcare provider actually is a better choice than a family member, right? And so I think we sometimes have to look at these things and say, wow, this is a really nuanced conversation. And we all make different decisions based on our own lives and lived experiences and goals. And if you want to be a stay at home mom, that's amazing. We should support that. And if I want to be a working mom, we should support that. And we need to take that negative connotation out of it, especially when we say replace the word mom with dad. And would you be saying the same thing? Chances are you wouldn't.
So true. Just that little switch. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And you've heard the men get compliments when they're at the grocery store and they're just doing the bare basics, right? They're just like walking down with their cart and they'll get complimented on it. And yet a woman walking down, a mother having her 3 kids, they'll be like, oh, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. Yeah, why are we so hard on ourselves? And especially within our own community, right? Why are women so hard on other women?
The patriarchy.
Oh gosh. Well, let's talk about that invisible load or labor, right? I think you talked about that, the invisible labor of motherhood and in how that you have a very equitable split in your home, you said. Can you walk us through what that looks like? Not necessarily in your home, but just like when people talk about that, what do they mean?
Well, so I use the term equity because a lot of people will say equal. And I personally believe nothing can really ever be equal within a home when you have children and careers. It's just impossible. Sometimes my career is busy and I'm traveling a lot. Sometimes yours is. And we're always kind of tipping the scales back and forth and trying to figure out what feels fair for our relationship. But equity is something I feel like we can all achieve, right? We can find something that feels fair for our relationships based on the nuance of our lives. My husband works shift work. He's a blue collar worker. And today, for example, he's working till 11 p.m. at night. He will not be home. It would be crazy of me to be like, well, that's not fair, right? Like, this is his career. We've discussed what this looks like and what he contributes in his absence. How does he support me in his absence to make it feel fair? He can't be physically here to split the work 50-50 today, but he can do things to make my life a little bit easier while he's gone. And so when I think about equity as it pertains to my relationship or anybody's relationship, I often encourage people to look at their time. look at your time and view each person's time as equally valuable. So we can view our time as equally valuable. He might get paid X amount of dollars for going to work today, but that doesn't make that hour more important than my hour. They're the same. They are equally important. And when we start to look at time, we can also look at where we're off, right? We can say, like, hey, you know what's strange? I've noticed that you go to the gym 10 hours a week, and I haven't gone to the gym once since we had kids. That doesn't feel fair. That's not fair. That's not equitable. Yes, you work 5 more hours a week than me, but somehow I'm doing 20 hours more a week of childcare. That doesn't feel fair, right? And so, how do we adjust those things? And this is not about going tit for tat. This is just about having these conversations and assessing the nuance here. So, whether you've read the book Fair Play or another method, I often encourage people to make the invisible labor in their relationship visible, right? Put it on paper, whether it's a spreadsheet, the Fair Play game, a notes app with your partner, whatever it is, make the invisible labor you're doing visible so that way you can have a conversation about what it looks like to share it in an equitable way. My husband leaves for work at 6:15 every day. The kids are hopefully, fingers crossed, not awake yet. He can't do the morning routine with me. Like, he'll never be able to do that with me. And so how does he show up? Even though he's not physically there, he always takes the dog out and feeds the dog. He fills up every kid's water bottle. He makes sure there's coffee downstairs. He empties the dishwasher if it's full. He does all of those things because he can't be doing the morning routine with me. But those things actually are so incredibly helpful to me in my morning and to the kids. And so that's how he shows up for our family and for our home. And so, I think it's about saying, like, hey, this is all the work that goes into the morning routine. And even though you're not physically here, you can actually own these pieces of it. Like, you can do these things, which would free up space and time for me to focus on the kids or whatever it might be. And so, it's a tricky conversation to have. I think it's a very difficult conversation to have, actually. But I think the first step is making this invisible work, the mental load, all of it, as visible as you possibly can in your home.
So good. And you said a few things there I was going to bring back up. When I hear equal, instead of equitable, right? When I hear equal, I do hear tit for tat. I hear scorekeeping. I hear things that bring up a fight, right? Like, you're at odds instead of equitable. Like you said, we have to just figure out what feels fair for us. And like in my house, our home, I do the cooking. My husband did not grow up cooking. Like, he'll cook a couple times a year. Like, he'll make something for my birthday or Valentine's Day, but it takes a long time. That is a long process, and there's a lot of planning that goes in, but it makes him appreciate what I do then on a regular basis, right? But he is like, I'll just clean up, right? And it's so nice to know that when I'm done with the meal, I don't have to be the one in the kitchen cleaning up. I try to clean up as I go just to make sure that we don't spend our whole night in a messy kitchen. And if I can do it while I'm cooking, that's great. But to me, that feels equitable. Is it equal? No. It's not like I'm cooking dinner 3 nights a week and he cooks dinner 3 nights a week and we eat out once a week. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you gave the example of things he is able to do and help without having to actually do all of those exact same things. And yeah, so that's great.
Yeah. And I think you brought it up. It doesn't have to be a tit for tat. In either instance, I think regardless, it can feel that way. It shouldn't. The goal should be, and this is really important, like if you start to have these conversations, set a goal with your partner. To your point, you just said, we don't want to spend our night cleaning in the kitchen. Like, we want to spend the night together. That's part of the reason you're working together to figure out what this looks like, right? Like, you have a goal in mind, which is to actually spend quality time together and not be cleaning your kitchen. And so I encourage people to start with that goal in mind when you are having these conversations. Hey, yeah, I want to share this work more fairly because I actually want time for hobbies and I know you want to go golfing. And so how do we make that happen together, right? Having that kind of goal in mind can be really helpful.
That makes a lot of sense. So what are some of the most common misconceptions people have about what it means to be a working mom today?
Well, I think a lot of people view women's careers as hobbies and optional, as though it's not necessary, which I think is really interesting because there's also a ton of conversation about the economy and how difficult it is right now. So the majority of homes are dual income homes. They just are. And now, since we know that, I think it's like 70%, you'll have to fact check that number, but of mothers are working in some capacity. And so the majority of moms are working mothers. And we still have this stigma around it somehow where we view it as a negative thing or an optional thing, something they don't have to do. And because we view it that way, when roadblocks come up, systemic barriers like the lack of paid leave, the lack of affordable childcare, we view women's careers again as optional. And so if somebody's going to have to leave to accommodate those things, we choose her. And it's interesting because that's just the assumption, right? That mom will leave the workforce. And this ripples through our lives in regards to kind of the motherhood penalty. There is a bias against mothers in the workplace, but not fathers. Fathers are viewed as more reliable, more hardworking. They're a family man, they have a family to provide for. And they actually do better in the workforce. Not just than mothers, but than men without children. Like fathers do better in the workforce. And there's this preconceived notion that they are going to work harder because they have kids. And when you're a mom, you're viewed as being less reliable, less dedicated to your job, more of a flight risk, right? Like she might leave the workforce. Why would she leave the workforce? Because there's not affordable childcare available to her, because there's not enough sick days and her kids are sick 15,000 days a year or whatever it is, right? It's the fact that summer break is really long and camp is incredibly expensive. What is it that is causing her to leave the workforce, right? So there's all these misconceptions about women, but I think it starts there, which is we first and foremost view that participation in the workforce as optional, as a nice to have, not a necessity, right? And you often hear people say like, oh, one of the bad things about feminism is it made it so women had to work. And it's like, that's not what happened, right? Women have always been working. I actually think that's really important to say. Women have always been working, whether it was paid or unpaid. Women have always been working. It's just different now because they have more control over their own finances and the situation. And most of them are getting paid for the work they're doing outside of the home. And so it's just a different instance. But outside of the ultra privileged, women have always had jobs. Like my mom had a job. My grandmother's had jobs. Every woman I know has had a job. And so the idea that it's a new thing is also part of the problem because I think that's a common misconception, which was like, oh, moms in the 50s didn't work. No, a very specific mom in the 50s didn't work, but most of them did.
Right. And the great thing is now we have more choice in the job we do. Otherwise, in the 50s, we were secretaries, we were teachers, we were nurses. We would get coffee for people. We'd be a waitress. Like you didn't get to actually do the jobs you wanted to do. You got stuck doing jobs you didn't want to do. And that's the difference to me. Yeah.
Yeah, and you bring that up. It's like I just mentioned my grandmother's. One worked in a factory because that was very common around here, and like it was a candy factory, and another worked at a hospital. And she wasn't a nurse, but she brought food to people, and that's what she did. And then my mom worked in that hospital, my aunt worked in that hospital, and that was kind of the pipeline to their careers, which was interesting. And they ended up some of them staying in the medical field, but others didn't. And I think it's interesting because those are now female dominated fields. And there's this thing that happens when women enter a field, which is the more women that enter it, the lower the pay gets. And again, that's kind of diluting it, right? When women are here, it's no longer a very important high paid job. And so we've seen that with teaching and nursing. And I think it's something worth, again, stepping back and looking at and saying like, okay, how did we get here? And why did we get here?
Yeah. Oh, so interesting. And you bring up so many interesting topics and ideas. It just is so frustrating, right? It's just so frustrating, especially as a mom to a daughter, right? Knowing that she's facing all of these uphill battles before she even does anything just because of who she is and the genitalia she has. It's crazy. Doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And it's hard parenting. I have 3 daughters and a son. Parenting all of them is hard, like in telling them, like having them watch what's going on in the world and ask questions about that, or even just like Women's History Month. My son being like, why isn't there a Men's History Month? And having to have, and out of a really good place, he was 7, right? Like, whoa, why don't I get one of those? And, we had conversations about that. I don't know that our parents did that. Like my mom was very much like, you can be anything you want to be, never rely on a man financially, like really empowered me, but didn't maybe lay the foundation of what the barriers were going to look like and how hard it was going to be. And all of those systemic things that maybe I wasn't as aware of. Like I didn't really quite understand it until I was living it.
So how do we start to have these conversations? One, just in our home first, how do we start to make things more equitable for ourselves? If we're listening to this and going, I have a great husband, like he's fantastic, my partner's fantastic, and they want to help out, but I just don't even know where to start. How do we start to have these conversations?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I do believe that we can start at home, right? It feels really daunting to say, like, I want to take on the world and get paid leave for everyone. That's hard, right? Like, people have been trying to do that for a very long time. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I truly believe that equity in our homes will bleed into our workplaces and vice versa. So we need to work on both of those things. And so I started home because it felt like I could actually achieve something there. And what I will say is, oftentimes women will say, I have a great husband, a great father. I am resentful, I am frustrated, I am burnt out, and I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm incredibly unhappy in this relationship and in parenting, and I can't do it all. I'm dying over here. And it can feel really hard to get out of that place. And I do think that if we have partners that are willing and able to do the work with us, we are able to make changes at home in a really productive way, and once you do that, you free up time to start looking outside of your home and to think about your kids and to think about your community and to think about your workplace and to have these larger conversations that we're having. I will tell you, when I was burnt out and frustrated and resentful, I did not care about anything that was happening outside of my home. I was so burnt out. I could not think about another thing and had no capacity. Like, I remember saying to my husband, like, I literally have no capacity for anything else. I have nothing left to give. This is all I've got. Like, I'm giving everything I have to this. And so it's okay to start small and to start at home. And I actually think it's really valuable. And I think you can start that by having conversations. So, whether it's about domestic inequities, like who's doing the chores, whether it's about the mental load, all of it, maybe the parenting part of it, having conversations with our partners can make a world of difference, because I think a lot of men and women are just speaking different languages on this topic, right? Women will come to their husbands and say, I'm so burnt out and I need your help. And he'll say, okay, just tell me what to do. And then they lose their mind. They're like, oh my God, I can't tell you what to do. There's a list that's 20 miles long. I don't even know where to start. And then you're going to ask me questions. And then you're going to tell me to remind you. And it's not helpful. It's not helpful. And he's thinking, if you just told me to empty the dishwasher, I'd do it. Or if you just told me to do the laundry, I would do it. And like, here I am. I'm willing to help out. And they don't understand the mental load piece of it. Like, they're missing that part. They see the tasks and they're like, okay, great. I'm going to cook dinner every single night. But they don't realize how, when they ask her every single night what to cook, they haven't actually taken anything off of her plate. Like, they're physically cooking dinner, but mentally she's still in charge of it and responsible for the groceries and all the things that go into dinner. And so I think there's this really strong disconnect between men and women about what we're really talking about. I think they think chores, and women are like, it's not chores. It's so much more than chores. And so I think what we really need to do is sit down and have really intentional conversations about what we're talking about, which is why making that invisible labor visible is really important. You can sit down and say, hey, when I ask for your help and you say, I'll do the birthday party, and then you proceed to ask me for all of the parents' names and their email addresses and what time and where should we host it and what do you think we should feed the kids? Like, you haven't planned the birthday party, right? Like, I'm still doing that work. And so how do you take full ownership and accountability of this thing? And doing that slowly, offloading things to your partner slowly, and really offloading the entirety of that thing. In Fair Play, they'll call it CPE, so concept, planning, execution. But it's really the thinking, the knowing, the remembering, the doing. Passing that fully to your partner for a specific task. And once they have that down, adding something else. Over time, you can tip those scales and really rebalance the dynamics in your home. But I also like to tell people there's no overnight fix. This takes a long time. It takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. You're constantly going to be communicating about this. I think in our relationship, it probably took us a solid year to get really good at these conversations. But now we're 3 years out and we don't talk about it anymore because we don't have to. And that's the beauty of the hard work. It's you're establishing kind of the groundwork that you're going to build on. And eventually, one day, you don't really have to have conversations about it anymore. Logistics, yes, of course, you have children. But in general, you're not talking about that anymore. You're just living your life and you feel supported and it feels equitable.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I appreciate you saying, like, it took us like a year to get to a place where it started to actually feel like it was something that was going to then work out. And now, 3 years later, we're not thinking about it. And in between there was kind of where it started to, really soar and take off. And it makes me think of, raising your children, right? We don't expect them to be able to take care of themselves, right? You don't expect a toddler to be able to tie their shoes. You don't expect them to be able to get themselves out the door or take care of themselves until they're a little bit older. And why do we expect something that we've been doing for 1, 5, 10, 20, 25 years to be fixed overnight? And so just giving some of that just expectation setting, I think, is really helpful, and just giving people a place to say like, okay, all right, I can do this, but I got to be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. And you both have to be willing to come to the table with good intent, right? So men have to be willing to come to these conversations and not get defensive and not get angry, and to try and push aside any maybe shame they might be feeling about this conversation because they're hearing, I'm not good enough, right? That's what they hear. And a lot of women will get very frustrated by the idea that men are defensive. They're like, how dare he be defensive? I'm the one who's burnt out. I'm the one who's resentful. Like, how could he even consider being the defensive one? And I understand that. Like, I was that person. I felt that. But I also think it's a pretty normal reaction when somebody comes to you and tells you you're not doing enough to get defensive, right? Like, we've all done it at work or in a friendship with our sister, whomever it is, right? They come to you and they say, hey, I don't like how you did that. And your first instinct is to defend yourself. It is not humility. It is not like you're just taking it on and like, I hear you. Yes, I'm validating that. Like, our first instinct, I think, as people is to go walls up, let me protect myself and tell you why I did what I did or whatever it is. And my suggestion to couples, because I think this is the biggest roadblock in these conversations, is defensiveness, is to highlight it and say, hey, like, you're getting defensive. Let's talk about it. Because this is not supposed to be a fight, right? Like, we're supposed to be coming to this table together and looking to achieve a certain goal. You're feeling defensive. Why? And they might say, well, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or whatever it is. Like, I'm feeling badly that you're feeling this way. Any of those things. I think addressing that defensiveness and then saying, in order for us to have a productive conversation, we both have to come to this table and put that aside and just talk about what's going on and just formulate a plan to get where we're going, and not allow that feeling of defensiveness to stop us. Because what happens oftentimes is men get defensive, women get mad, and then the conversation ends and it doesn't go anywhere from there. And then we keep going on this hamster wheel where we always try to address it. And when we do, he gets upset and defensive, and then we just back off and it goes away again. And so in order to get past that, I really do think we have to flag it and say, hey, like, this is what's happening. Do you agree that this is what's happening? Okay, why are you feeling defensive? What is that? And then move past that. Because I think for my husband, he would say, what feels like you're telling me I'm a bad dad. I would say, I've never said that. I said, I need your help. I need you to do more when it comes to daycare drop off or pickup, whatever. I need more. I never once said anything about you being a bad dad. I didn't say that. So you're hearing something I didn't say. And I think we all do that, right? Like, we interpret it how we're feeling. And once we were able to say that, I would say to him at the beginning of a conversation, please listen to what I'm saying, not what you think I'm saying. Like, really listen to the words I'm saying and not what you are interpreting that I'm saying. And I'm being very intentional about what I'm saying here. So I do think it's important to have those, like, these are not fun, easy conversations, but they can be really helpful, where I can say to my husband, hey, I want you to hear this. I am not saying anything about your parenting. That is literally not what we're talking about. I'm specifically talking about the diaper bag. Okay? So let's just talk about the diaper bag for a hot second. And it's nothing deeper than the diaper bag, right? So I do think, we have to get really good at flexing that muscle with each other and not feeling like we have to defend ourselves in those moments, but just being open to changing how we do things.
Yeah. And it made me think too, like, okay, first off, if we can back up that conversation and think about all of the societal pressures that have been put on us as women, take a moment and think of all the societal pressures that have been put on our partners and what their roles, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes over here, are, and what they're supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be the providers, and they're supposed to be the strength and stability and all the things. I'm just saying shoulds, right? Societally says this. I'm not saying this. But that's what they've been fed too, right? And so then if they feel like I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing, right? Why are you unhappy? Why are we unhappy? Why is there tension in this house? You can see how that would come into play. So first off, look at that. And then two, and this is where, like, not in this topic in particular, but in other topics, you look at it from a perspective of, put yourself in their shoes, like in a situation where you would feel someone's coming and attacking. What, they're not attacking, but you feel like they're attacking you, right? So they are making a comment on your parenting. They're making a comment on what your house looks like. They're making a comment on what you fed your child for lunch. Your first reaction is like, what the heck do you mean? Like, what is that all about? No, like you get defensive too. Like you said, your first reaction is to put up those walls. So just having that moment of, okay, this is how I would react if someone were coming at me or to me with a conversation about this. How can I have a little bit more patience when I'm starting the conversation? Because it is super easy to get frustrated. And that's not what we want, right? So I love that you're saying, like, just listen to the words I'm saying. Don't interpret it. It's really true, but we often do that in our own lives. And so just to be able to have that moment of like, okay, they're hearing this. This is what I would probably hear. How can I say it in the way that we all need to hear it and say it so that it actually resonates?
Yeah, and I understand for some that might feel really frustrating, right? Because especially if you're the person who's feeling burnt out and resentful, it is hard to show up to these conversations with that much empathy for your partner. And it's hard. These are hard conversations. The question is, do we want to fix it? Do we want to make it work? Are we both willing to put in this work together? And it can be hard to do and it takes a lot of time and effort, but I think it's really valuable work. And in an ideal world, we're having these conversations before we reach the burnout point or any feelings of resentment. We did this work before we got married, right? Like we did this work. You know, you were saying our parents didn't have these conversations. I didn't have these conversations until I was deep in it. I wish I'd had, but because I'd been with my husband since I was 16, like we had plenty of time to talk, but we didn't talk about this stuff. And I wish I'd known better and I didn't. And my hope is that the more of us having these transparent conversations about how we've addressed it and what we've done, the more that people will start to have these conversations before they get into this dynamic so they can kind of avert them, right? Like we don't have to fall into this pattern. We're going to have to work really hard not to, right? Again, those systemic barriers like paid leave and childcare and all those things make it really hard. But if we're aware of it and we're constantly pushing back against it as a team, it's much easier to avoid it.
Yeah, the team dynamics right there are so great. And I think too, you don't know to have the conversations until you're in it, right? Until you realize that you're frustrated by something. You didn't realize something was going to be so hard, or you didn't realize how you were going to feel, or the pressures that were going to be put on you, or how you showed up, right? You didn't know what kind of parent you were going to be until you had kids, right? You didn't understand all of the stuff that went into it, and you didn't realize the mental load would burn you out because you didn't know the mental load existed, I think, until you're in it. So I think it's okay to give ourselves that grace too of being like, it's okay. But like you said, the more people talk about it, the more we can see other people going through it, succeeding through it, and having these conversations, these tough conversations, the better it will be for everyone. So yeah.
Yeah. And if you fell into this position or this dynamic, you're not alone. I think it can feel like a very isolating experience and people don't talk about it and they feel a lot of shame around being in a position where they're like, "Hey, I was this independent working woman and I said I was going to be a working mom and now that I'm doing it, it's like not working and my marriage is suffering and I obviously did something wrong." Like I did something wrong, we did something wrong, we took a wrong turn somewhere. When in reality, it's kind of the turn that we were all inevitably going to take because of the systems at play and those societal expectations. And so it's not your fault. I think a lot of times people feel like it's an individual issue when in reality, like as a society, so many of us are dealing with this and really struggling to navigate this dynamic. And especially in this new world where parenting expectations are different and workplace expectations are different and the world is different, it is very difficult. But we have the language to start having these conversations. And it's really just about, to your point, you said that the teamwork part, I always tell people this is something that's really hard to avoid. So look at it as you and your partner against the problem as opposed to you and your partner against each other, right? You're pushing back against those expectations. You're pushing back against those barriers together. And the goal is to do that together, not against one another. And I think when you can kind of shift that dynamic, it's still hard, but when you shift that mindset and you think, okay, we are tackling this problem of this overwhelming amount of mental load that we carry together, it changes. But I will also say, as it pertains to the mental load, Even when you have an equitable partner, I often hear women say, wow, but it's still so heavy, right? And then their partner will say, yeah, it's incredibly heavy. Because what I think to be true is that actually the work we're doing within our homes and the expectations we've placed on parents these days and in workplaces, it's unsustainable even for two people. Truly. I don't think it's sustainable for two people, even when you're sharing it in the most equitable way possible, which is why you always hear people saying, like, where's the village? Like, where's the help? I need more, or I need a more flexible workplace, or whatever it might be. I think have some grace for yourself if it still feels a little hard. It'll feel vastly different when you have a partner who participates, but I've found that a lot of men and women will say, like, this is actually still pretty hard. Like, even when we share it in a fair way, there's maybe too much going on in our world to make this feel easy.
So, how do we start to make that a little bit lighter? Do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, I think it depends on your situation, right? I really do. I think it depends on how many kids you have, your workplace, all of those things. I think there's some things we can do in our workplaces. I alluded to this at the beginning, which was I had a really flexible job, and that was super intentional. Like, I needed flexibility. I think we need to push on corporations to have more flexible policies that are family friendly. And I know some people who especially don't have kids are like, why should we have family friendly policies? I get that. But children and families are important for our economy and our society. They're a necessity. And so if we have a ton of workplaces that are just not family friendly in any way, it makes it near impossible for people to be parents and to maintain their careers. And so we still see far too many women leaving the workforce. And we also see the pressure put on men with return to office mandates and all of these things. Like, we can put pressure on our workplaces and say, hey, actually, this is what we need in order to be successful and for your business to be successful. There's a positive ROI for things like childcare benefits. So when companies provide childcare benefits, whether it's backup childcare stipends, whatever it is, there's a positive ROI for businesses and for employee retention. And so that's something we can push on. I think all of those things would make a massive difference, right? If parents didn't feel like, oh, I only get 10 PTO days and my kid has 28 professional development days at school, how am I supposed to make that work? That's what feels heavy, right? It's not necessarily working with your partner. It's the fact that in our society, we haven't made it conducive to modern parenting. We just haven't. And so that, I think, is actually, once we work within our homes, like I said, we free up some bandwidth to say, like, hey, workplaces, we need to change. Policy needs to change. Like, we need to advocate for that, even if we maybe won't ever get it, for other parents to have access to that. Because I truly believe that without that, we're going to continue to kind of walk this fine line of still kind of teetering on the edge of being like, this is really hard, because it is really hard to navigate a public school calendar for your kids when you have a corporate job and only 10 PTO days. It feels actually nearly impossible.
And it doesn't even include summer. That doesn't even include the summer break. Those are just for the people that are listening. That's just during the school year.
Yeah. Well, my kids had 37 half days or no school days, and that did not include vacation weeks or any of that. And so my husband and I combined only had 35 PTO days. That would be our entire PTO. It's more than our PTO. And so it's like, if you're not taking the day off, then you're paying for childcare, and it's hard to coordinate that childcare, right? That can be the stuff that really is hard. And so that's why I again say, like, zoom out. Zoom out. Why is this feeling hard? Maybe it's not because of just your partner. Maybe it's because of workplace expectations or whatever it might be. And so we can't always change all of those things, but I actually think having the context can be a bit freeing, where you're like, okay, you know what? This is hard because I don't have enough PTO and there's like a million school days, and that's hard. And so I'm going to try and intentionally build community with other parents, and we can support each other. They have 10 PTO days. I have 10. They're going to take my kid on this one. I'm going to take their kid on that one, right? And kind of build those communities with the knowledge that this is hard for all of us.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's so good. I was just going to say that was going to be my next question was, you've got a lot of moms and women listening to this that are like, yeah, okay, I'm fired up. I want to go do something. But a lot of this feels big and heavy. What can I do today? What's a small thing I can do right now that can at least start getting us in the right direction?
Yeah. So I think if you've worked on this in your kind of home, you've addressed these things in your home, and now you're thinking, okay, like, how do we make this sustainable? I really do think building some sort of community as super hard, right? Like, you hear all the time, it's hard to make mom friends, or it's hard to build community. Where's this village? I actually think it is hard, but if you're really, really intentional about it, it is possible and incredibly beneficial, right? Being able to text a fellow parent and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to swing dance class on Wednesday. Can you drive my daughter home? And then the next week, them being able to say, hey, I actually can't make soccer practice. Do you mind driving my son home? And having community where you rely on each other and can support one another in a way is so important. I even think about like when your friend has a baby and you do the meal train, right? Like all of those things we tend to reserve for like super special moments. And we don't think about the everyday, which is how do we support each other all the time within our homes and within our communities and build that. It's hard and it takes intention, but you'll often hear people saying online, if you want to be a part of a village, you also have to be a villager. And so you do also have to participate in the village. You have to start the meal train. You have to offer a pickup. You have to be a part of it. Like a lot of people are yelling about a village, but then aren't probably participating in one either. And so doing that work is really, really important. And I think can be so beneficial. We've become so individualistic, even that idea of like, oh no, I failed. It's like you didn't fail, right? We don't have that kind of community anymore. And so we got to build that. We got to work at that. And it takes a lot of time and effort. But if you can do it, right, then you'll see some change. So I think starting small in your neighborhood, in your community, with your friends, and going out from there, some of this change, paid leave, right? We might not change that on a federal level for a long time, but can you advocate at work? Can you advocate in your state? A lot of states are enacting policies that are really beneficial to families. And so, what work can be done on a state level? What work can be done in your local community? All of those things are just as valuable. And so, it doesn't have to feel so large all the time.
Yeah. And I think too, as I'm sitting there, what you were saying is you've got to start it. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be the one that says, this is going to be really hard for me to say, but I can't do it all. I can't. I'm struggling. I need your help. And I think being the first person to raise your hand and say, hey, can you help? Or like put your hand out and say, can you take my hand and help me this week with this thing? And having that just, it's going to be okay. I'm really scared to say this. I'm afraid that, someone's going to say like, oh, you're such a bad mom. You can't do all that stuff. But it's going to be okay. And especially if you're reaching out to people that are in your community, I hope you have good enough friends that they're not going to say that about you. If you don't, then you need new friends. But yeah, having that moment of just like, you know what, I need a little help. I would love for us to do something together, right? And, whatever that case may be, whatever it looks like in your life at the moment. Like obviously if you have little kids, your need is going to be different than if you have, like for me, our daughter going into junior high. That's a different need, a different ask that we're going to have. We're going to have a lot of emotions and things like that coming up for us versus making sure they're not going to turn on the stove and burn their hand. There's lots of things going on there. But yeah, just being vulnerable and be the first person to ask and see what happens.
Yeah, I think so. I think you have to be able to reach your hand out there and ask for help and also invite men into this, right? Men can do pickups and drop offs and all the things. And so I think a lot of women think a lot about building community, and we need men involved in that community and in that village as well. And so I think that's important too, kind of having it be a collaborative effort between everybody, not just moms doing that work.
Totally. Yeah. Good point. Thanks for bringing that up. One of our good friends, the dad is really involved. We do the musical at school and he is a former opera singer. And so, he's very involved in the musical and it is really nice to see that as well. But I will say, like, this is really weird. But he was asked not to, like, I was helping with costumes and he was asked not to touch the children. It's just kind of like there are some weird stigmas still on both sides. It's really weird.
And I've definitely heard that from men like, oh, well, I don't text the babysitter because I don't want to be weird. And because like I'm an older man and it's a younger girl, I don't know that it's appropriate. And I understand all of those things. Yet I do think there's things we can do and conversations we should be having. I don't know that's valid, like what just happened, right? But I understand it too. Like I can see both sides of all this. I've said to these men, hey, if you're feeling uncomfortable and say she's a high schooler, add her mom to the chat. And just say, hey, I'm texting, hoping your daughter can babysit or like hoping so-and-so can babysit on Tuesday night. Wanted to check in and let the mom know like, hey, I want you to be included. I don't want her to feel any sort of way. Like I know it's a little weird. If it's a 20-year-old girl, add your wife to the group chat and say, hey, we're looking for a babysitter, but lead it. Don't expect her to do it, right? So when we talk about equity in these instances, sure, I think there's some barriers for men. There's a lot of stigma, and we don't often view men as good caregivers. And we also are weary of men in our world for a variety of reasons. And so if that's the case, we know that's the case, then create some buffer. Add your wife to the chat, add the mom to the chat, add it so it doesn't feel uncomfortable, so it's not awkward. So that way it doesn't feel any sort of way. Like I do think men will often say, yeah, it's too weird, so my wife will do it. No, we find a way to make it not weird, right? Like we do what we should do to make it not weird and not uncomfortable. And so that way you can still share this workload with your wife so she's not always the person planning the babysitter. So I do think it's something where, yeah, we can't have this conversation without addressing what you just said, which is there's barriers for men just as much as there are for women.
Yes. Good point. But I do like that tip. Those are some really great, just simple ways to say, hey, it doesn't have to be weird. And yes, it's absolutely okay to have that, third party in there to make sure everybody feels comfortable on all sides, all parties, because you're not trying to do anything nefarious. You're not trying to be weird. You're just trying to do the things that you need to do to live your life and make life better for you and your family and everybody in between. So, Paige, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? I know they're going to want to find out more and connect.
Yeah, I am all over social media at She is a Paige Turner, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, all of it. I'm on LinkedIn at Paige Connell, and I also have a Substack. Or you can visit my website, she'saPaigeTurner.com, and you'll find all of that.
Fantastic. We will have links in the show notes as well, so people could just click right through, make that really simple. But before I let you go, my favorite way to close out every episode is with some rapid fire questions. So number 1, what does clutter-free mean to you?
Oh my gosh, I am a bit of a type A person, so it means everything has a home. So like I just need things to be in their place. My house isn't always like quote unquote clean, but everything is where it's supposed to be. That is my goal. Every single day we kind of like reset and start fresh.
That's a great goal, and your home looks beautiful. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see she's got a beautiful space behind her, which looks very organized and nice, clutter-free for sure. Number 2, what's making you happy right now or in this season of life?
I have recently gotten back to somewhat of a fitness routine with yoga and Pilates, which I did a lot before kids. And then, kids come along. It's been 6 years. And I'm like, wait, what happened? Which has been giving me some joy. I'm really enjoying it and struggling, but also having fun.
Very fun. All right. Number 3, what is a goal you have for yourself this year?
I set a goal for myself at the beginning of this year to see my friends once a week. And I have pretty much done it. And I think it's something we don't do enough as women, which is make time for ourselves and our friends and our hobbies. And so I made a very intentional goal to do that. And yeah, it's been great. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Love that goal. You may inspire me to actually do that. I have all these plans of like, I'm just going to do like the first Tuesday of the month or pick a day and just be like, I'm going to be here if you are available and want to come meet. That way there's less planning involved, but okay. You're making me want to put it on my calendar.
You should do it. Do it. Yeah. And it can be simple. Like sometimes it's just like, hey, you free? I'm going for a walk. And that is it. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate.
Yeah. Love it. All right, Paige, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.
I love these kinds of conversations where we can get real. We can validate the feelings that we have without crossing over into being mean to other people, right? It's okay to feel upset, but also know that that doesn't mean we're going to tear anyone else down. We just need to find the right solution that works for us and our families and our partners, because again, we're a team. We're in this together. It's us against the problem, not us against each other, as Paige reminded us. And she has such a powerful way of putting into words what so many of us feel, but don't always know how to or feel comfortable saying out loud, right? That invisible labor, the quiet resentment, the deep desire for a partnership and balance in a world that wasn't really built with moms in mind, right? And we're still fighting this, even though we've already made so much progress. it's still inherently there. And so I hope this episode gave you some permission to let go of the guilt and helped you feel a little less alone, helped you know that it's not an insular problem, right? It's not just you. A lot of people feel this way, and it's okay. And there's a lot of things that are fighting against us, but we can fight back. I would love to know, though, what resonated for you the most. Was there a light bulb moment? Was there something that you were like, oh my gosh, yes, a truth bomb that hit home? Anything that you would like to share? Come on over to Instagram and tell me all about it. I am at Wannabe Clutter Free. You can jump in the conversation in our private Facebook group as well if you feel more comfortable there, because again, that's private. So you can join us. It's the Wannabe Minimalist Family Group over there, and that can stay there and not live for public on Instagram if that feels more comfortable. And if you've got a minute, leaving a quick rating or a review really helps more overwhelmed moms find this show, and it means the world to me. It really does help me just know that I'm helping you. All right, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, those are the big three, but wherever you listen, it really does make a difference and puts a smile on my face. All right. Huge thanks, of course, to Paige for sharing her story and her wisdom with us today, and letting us all know that we can actually make a difference in our homes and in our own lives. You can find all of her links and the show notes for today over at wannabeclutterfree.com/264. Again, wannabeclutterfree.com/264. And next week, I will be back here for a solo episode. We're continuing our Clutter Freedom series. It's part 5 of the Find Your Number series, and we'll be talking about one-on-one. It's the aspect of how physical clutter can impact your romantic relationship. Yep, we're going there. It's going to be perfect after this week. All right, until then, take care. Give yourself some grace. Go ahead and let go of the expectations you've been holding, maybe some of those resentment feelings that you've been having. Clear a little of that mental space and make room for these tough conversations. Know that you can do it. I believe in you. Paige believes in you, and you can do hard things. So believe in yourself. All right, I'm Deanna Yates, and you've been listening to Wanna Be Clutter Free. I'll see you next week. Cheers.